On January 19, 2010, a man was found dead under mysterious circumstances in a luxury hotel room in Dubai. Mahmoud Al-Mabhouh, a senior figure in Hamas, had been assassinated in a meticulously planned espionage operation that captured the world's attention. As the investigation unfolded, shadowy intelligence agencies, international intrigue, and a web of covert operations were revealed. In this documentary, we explore the chilling details surrounding Al-Mabhouh's death, uncovering the complex world of political assassinations, the hidden power struggles of the Middle East, and the shadowy forces that shape global politics. Was this a mission by a foreign government, or a deadly act of retribution? The truth may be more complicated than anyone imagined. This is the story of the Dubai job, the assassination of Hamas's chief arms dealer. Mahmoud Al-Mabhouh was born in Gaza's Jabalia refugee camp on February 14, 1960, to a pious family with 13 brothers and sisters. He was introduced to religion at a young age, thanks to a family acquaintance who lectured them about fiqh, the general Islamic jurisprudence, jihad, patience, and other related topics. He described the family atmosphere as Islamic and stated he had an iron religious commitment then. As a teenager, he was interested in weightlifting, and after quitting secondary school, he studied to be a car mechanic and later opened his own garage. The 49-year-old Palestinian man had 4 children and was nicknamed the Fox, and joined the Muslim Brotherhood, a Sunni Islamist organization, before the age of 20. He once allegedly said, "They call me the Fox because I can sense what is behind me, even what is behind that wall." Since the 1980s, he became increasingly involved in more and more anti-Israel activities, and in 1986, security forces caught him with a Kalashnikov assault rifle in his luggage. Authorities sentenced him to a year in the Ashkelon prison, but after less than 2 months, they transferred him to Gaza's central jail. He claimed in a later interview that he was tortured for weeks in Ashkelon, although independent sources never confirmed this. A year later, during the First Intifada, former Muslim Brotherhood members created Hamas, the Palestinian nationalist Sunni Islamist organization, and the 27-year-old Al-Mabhouh, whose name means the Horse One, joined them. Due to its militant nature and attacks on civilians and government installations, the majority of the Western-oriented countries, including the United States, the European Union, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Japan, as well as Argentina and Paraguay in South America, and Australia and New Zealand in Oceania, designated Hamas as a terrorist organization. Armed conflicts between Israel and Hamas continue to this day. Before the October 2023 attacks, the former continued to build settlements, thereby narrowing the living space for the Palestinians, and the Iranian-backed Hamas continued its armed insurgency with missile and suicide attacks and knife-wielding assailants. Before the unprecedented mass murder, in which 1,200 people, including 800 civilians and 36 children, were killed, Hamas had 30,000 fighters and described the attack as a response to decades of Israeli oppression. At the time of editing this documentary, Hamas is facing complete annihilation. The movement is fighting an all-out war against the Israel Defense Forces as a consequence of the Nova Music Festival massacre. In the retaliatory war against Hamas, the Palestinian Health Ministry claims over 40,000 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli army in Gaza. Despite the religious differences, the Sunni Hamas's main supporter is the Shia Iran, and Mahmoud Al-Mabhouh was the key figure in connecting the two sides. The Fox was the top weapons negotiator and chief logistics officer of Hamas, responsible for arms procurement, and he was also the head of the movement's military wing, the Al-Qassam Brigades. He was the man who oversaw the transfer of advanced weapons from Iran, such as anti-tank missiles, guided missiles, and rockets, for the sole purpose of targeting the Jewish state. Al-Mabhouh's exceptional organizational skills and decades of conspiratorial activity earned him this position. As a young adult, he participated in the sabotage of Palestinian coffee shops where gambling was taking place. In 1989, however, he became one of Israel's most wanted after personally planning the abduction and killing of 2 Israeli soldiers, Sergeant Avi Sasportas and Corporal Ilan Sadon. He admitted to the murders in a 2009 interview with Al Jazeera, during which the Hamas commander had his face covered, but his voice was easily recognizable. According to Al-Mabhouh, on February 16, 1989, he even took part in the execution alongside Unit 101, Hamas's elite group tasked with abducting Israeli troops. Worth noting that the Israeli Defense Forces also had a Unit 101, but it was founded and commanded by Ariel Sharon on orders from Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion in August 1953. It was a commando armed with non-standard weapons and tasked with carrying out retribution operations across the state's borders. In 1989, Al-Mabhouh and another squad member, Abu Suhaib, disguised themselves as Jewish ultra-Orthodox men and drove near hitchhiking stops when they noticed a car drop off a few passengers at Hidayah roundabout, including 21-year-old Avi Sasportas, who was heading to his home in Ashdod. That was one of the places they used to observe, and they decided to offer a lift to the Maglin unit's army medic. The soldier accepted and sat in the back seat where boxes were placed beside him. Shortly after they drove off, Al-Mabhouh signaled Abu Suhaib to kill Sasportas. He shot him 3 times, after which they took him to an already prepared place and buried him there. We had stripped him of his clothes and belongings before we buried him. He had a wallet, an ID card, and a military card. He even had a special weapon with night view laser light. It was an M15 weapon, he told Al Jazeera. The sergeant's disappearance was initially regarded as a mystery, but authorities found him buried in a field on May 7, 1989, while searching for another missing IDF troop. On May 3, 1989, Corporal Ilan Sadon was given a leave of absence from the military and was with a friend near Latrun. As Al-Mabhouh recalled, they disguised themselves as Orthodox Jews again, and when a military bus stopped, the 2 troops got off and asked the Hamas fighters how they could reach the Maydal roundabout. The Palestinians were in a white Subaru with Israeli license plates, and Al-Mabhouh was the driver. They were near the Kiryat Maliki area and offered a ride for the soldiers towards Ashkelon, but only one of them was able to get in the car. Sources vary. Some said one of the doors was neutralized. Others stated the back seat was loaded with equipment, but Al-Mabhouh himself claimed he simply told the troops they only had a place for one. Ultimately, Sadon remained with them. They initially wanted to take the soldier to Gaza, but they changed their plan after seeing an Israeli patrol. After driving for about 3 kilometers on the highway, Al-Mabhouh signaled with a wave of his hand that the moment had come, indicating the road was clear ahead. His accomplice shot Sadon with a Beretta pistol, after which the 2 assailants stopped next to the road near Palmachim, triumphantly took photos with the dead Israeli, and threw him in the ditch. IDF launched an extensive investigation and detained 650 Hamas members, but they couldn't catch Al-Mabhouh. Members of Unit 101 managed to flee Gaza through the Rafah crossing into Egypt. However, his home was demolished, and he became one of Israel's most wanted. Cairo initially intended to extradite him to Israel, but fearing that this could trigger an uprising by the Muslim Brotherhood, they chose to deport Al-Mabhouh to Libya instead. Later, he established a Hamas base in Lebanon, began smuggling weapons into the Palestinian West Bank, and plotted attacks against Israeli tourists. Lebanon eventually expelled him and the Hamas leadership, forcing the Fox to move to Damascus, where he managed to build contact with the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. Al-Mabhouh proceeded to Dubai, and according to Hamas, he spent almost a year in jail in Egypt in 2003, but the details of this period are a bit blurry. There have been several attempts to kill him. In September 2004, Izz el-Din Sheikh Khalil, a prominent Al-Qassam member, was killed when his Mitsubishi Pajero was blown up, after which another explosive was found attached to Al-Mabhouh's car. A few months before the events of this documentary, in November 2009, He was poisoned with a radioactive substance in Beirut, Lebanon, and was unconscious for 36 hours. It is believed that the poison was smeared onto light switches and fixtures in his hotel room. Interestingly, he didn't suspect a murder attempt, but a natural disease. He had been living in Syria prior to his death and was wanted not just by Israel, but also by Egypt and Jordan. He became a priority target because he played a crucial role in deepening the ties between Hamas and the notorious Al-Quds force of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards throughout the years. Given al-Mabhouh's history and the complexity of Middle East politics, he posed a major threat to Israeli national security, particularly due to his role as the commander of weapons smuggling into Gaza. Their usual route ran through the Red Sea, along the Sudanese and Egyptian coasts, the Sinai Peninsula, and via secret tunnels. In addition to assault rifles, explosives, and other devices, those shipments would also include missiles, and all of them, without exception, would target Israeli lives. It was believed that he had also participated in the planning of numerous suicide attacks. In February 2009, he narrowly escaped death when a drone attacked a convoy he was traveling with in Sudan, after Israeli intelligence learned that the trucks were presumably carrying Iranian Fajr rockets. Certain sources claim his family wasn't aware of how influential he was in the Palestinian organization, only that he supported the fight against Israel. However, his brother Faik stated that al-Mabhouh was among the first fighters to engage in armed resistance against the Jewish state and was one of the founders of the Al-Qassam brigades. In 1989, Avi Sasportas and Ilan Sadan were the first two victims of Hamas's bloody war against the Jewish state, and as we can see, Mahmoud Al-Mabhouh just became increasingly dangerous to Israel's national security. With that in mind, the Fox was a prime target for Mossad, Israel's secret service, the secret service that is regarded as one of, if not the best in the world. One of my former bosses used to say, "There are 3 intelligence agencies in the world no one can hide from: the American, the Russian, and the Israeli." He was likely correct. In the second half of the 20th century, Mossad became the most lethal, effective, and ruthless organization in safeguarding national security, defending interests, and retaliating against attacks on its citizens. And this is how we arrive at the day when Mahmoud Al-Mabhouh flew from Damascus to Dubai, while the Hamas chief logistics officer was followed by a complete hit squad, the best of Mossad. This trip marked the beginning of a hastily, yet almost perfectly executed assassination that can only be seen in movies. On January 19, 2010, his driver took Mahmoud Al-Mabhouh to a back entrance at Damascus International Airport, where he spent some time in the VIP lounge before departure. He boarded Emirates flight EK 912 at 10:05 a.m. and flew to Dubai merely for transit. Lieutenant General Dahi Khalfan Tamim, the local police chief, later disclosed that he had a ticket to China and then on to Sudan, or the other way around. He visited Dubai regularly, sometimes for transit, and sometimes for various meetings related to his arms procurement activity and its financing, as the Emirates is attractive not only to tourists, but also to criminal and militant organizations. The city is in a relatively central location in the Middle East, on the shores of the Persian Gulf, where many Palestinians, Pakistanis, Iranians, and others have migrated throughout the years. In the international environment of Dubai, an unthinkable amount of money is at stake. Investors and billionaires migrate their businesses there, while the Islamic banking system can cause headaches for the police. Dubai has everything it takes to become a regional crime hub. Therefore, Tamim, who graduated from the Royal Police Academy in Amman, Jordan, which is regarded as the most esteemed police academy in the Arab world, suggested the government should take drastic measures, such as installing the most advanced American surveillance technology in the metropolis. This coverage includes the streets, bustling shopping malls, and luxury hotels too. CCTV will capture anyone entering the Emirates. Al-Mabhouh and the hit team were aware of this, but given his position, the senior Hamas commander made several critical mistakes. Most sources claim that the fox entered the country using a fake passport and name, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf Mohammed Hassan. However, Hamas later said that he used his real identity, but it is unlikely. He gave his occupation as a merchant, and this was also how he later checked into the 5-star Al Bustan Rotana hotel. The first mistake occurred when he booked his hotel online and shared the phone number with his family. But this wasn't a major issue because it could have been a deception too. He knew he was in Israel's crosshairs. Therefore, to verify his movements and confirm his flight, a field agent was already tailing him in Damascus. However, he made the fatal mistake of not bringing his bodyguards. To be more precise, he didn't wait for them, because there were no more seats on his flight for the security personnel, only the next day. As a result, one of Hamas's most important leaders was alone in the Emirates, providing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Israel's Mossad, where Al-Mabhouh's codename was Plasma Screen. He landed at 2:30 p.m., and 50 minutes later at 3:20 p.m., the Palestinian man taxied to the hotel near the airport. He arrived at 3:25, and the hotel assigned him room 230 on the second floor. He was not entirely careless, as he requested a room without a balcony and with sealed windows, so the only way to enter was through the door. Before heading to the second floor, he deposited cash and a bag full of documents in the hotel safe, unaware that more and more members of the assassination team had already begun to infiltrate the country. Several operatives arrived at Dubai International Airport ahead of him and dispersed throughout the city to await further instructions, and others were soon en route from various European locations. It was a mild winter day with a peak temperature of 77.5 degrees Fahrenheit or 25 degrees Celsius at 2 p.m. Their mission was fulfilled in less than a day, and in the following days Dubai police gathered altogether 648 hours of CCTV footage showing 27 suspects. Officials even released an edited version during a press conference on February 15th to seek help to identify the killers. Let's dive into it in chronological order. On January 19th, at 12:09 a.m., security cameras at Dubai International Airport captured two men with the assumed names Michael and James First as they walked through the building with their luggage. At 12:30 a.m., the next two persons, Gail and Kevin, arrived from Paris on Air France flight number 526, while Michael and James were seen checking into a Dubai hotel at 12:58 a.m. Gail arrived in front of another hotel 23 minutes later at 1:21, where she was also seen checking in. Kevin followed her shortly after, but they were given different rooms. The woman received room 1102, while the man got room 3308. At 2:29, a man known as Peter Elvinger entered the country, carrying luggage that was deemed suspicious. Local police later said Elvinger was believed to be the operations field commander. Interestingly, CCTV first showed him exiting the airport building before returning to meet one of the operatives. Following this, he took a taxi to another hotel. By that time, part of the team had settled into their accommodations. At 10:30 a.m., security cameras in a mall captured Elvinger, and three new members of the group also appeared. Six minutes later, Kevin and Gail entered the same shopping center, and less than an hour later, at 11:30 a.m., the woman walked out alone. A Mossad source later revealed to Ronan Bergman and GQ that during these meetings the members usually review plans and contingencies, and they are just waiting to see how their target's movements unfold. In this type of assassination, When the target is not in his home base and is not following a daily routine, it is the target who dictates to the killers how and when he will be killed, the source said. Kevin and another suspect left 48 minutes later, at 12:18 p.m., followed by two more at 12:41. Kevin checked out of his hotel at 1:37 p.m. and went to another at 1:45, where he walked through the lobby and changed his appearance in the restroom. The previously bald man was now wearing a wig and glasses. The first surveillance team, two men wearing baseball caps and tennis attire and holding rackets, entered the Al Bustan Rotana Hotel at 2:12 p.m. 2 minutes later, Kevin arrived at the Fairmont Hotel, a 5-star establishment located a 20-minute drive southeast of Al-Mabhouh's room. He was followed by two other conspirators at 2:21. So far, it was clear that the participants often changed their location, but never moved simultaneously. At 2:30, another agent went to an unnamed Dubai hotel frequently visited by Al-Mabhouh to see if he had booked a room there, but since he couldn't find him, he exited the building. It was critical for the hit team to monitor all the hotels in Dubai that the man had previously stayed in. Peter Elvinger checked out of his hotel at 2:41, and Gale did the same at 3:12. Meanwhile, scouts were waiting for Al-Mabhouh to arrive at the airport. At 3:18 p.m., the senior Hamas man eventually appeared on the cameras, leading one of them to follow him and inform the others. Five minutes later, a new member of the intelligence team arrived at the same hotel where Kevin and several other accomplices were staying. The next minute, Peter Elvinger, the suspected field commander, came with a rented car and driver. At 3:25, the woman named Gale also changed her look in the same building where Kevin had used the restroom earlier. The cameras recorded that she took off her sunglasses and started wearing her hair differently, but her outfit remained the same. She then left the hotel right away. Al-Mabhouh arrived at the Rotana Hotel at 3:25, but the two lookouts, dressed in tennis clothes, had already tailed him and even stood next to him at the reception. The two men followed him throughout the hotel and even got into the elevator with him. The Fox was monitored until he reached his room, so the Mossad could learn its exact number and also the room directly across, which was 237. The agent in the blue t-shirt was caught on camera in the corridor strolling back and forth. Meanwhile, the one wearing a white t-shirt appeared in front of the lift using some kind of communication device, presumably a secured cell phone. Throughout the day, CCTV recorded members of the team making several phone calls over encrypted channels. Later it was discovered that the receiving numbers were located in Vienna, Austria, but there will be a twist on this later. Following this, both lookouts headed to a remote area within the Rotana to discuss something, but then the man in white exited one of the side doors and spoke with someone on his cell phone. In the meantime, his mate returned to the corridor to continue monitoring, and once the call was finished, they departed via the elevator and descended to the lobby. Gale arrived at the Fairmont Hotel at 3:47 to meet with the others, and it is believed that this was when the final consultation took place before the action. At 3:53, the hit squad booked room 237, which faced Al-Mabhouh's, while he was already inside room 230. The reservation was made by Peter Elvinger from another hotel's business lounge near Rotana. Later, detectives learned that he actually made 2 phone calls while there, as he had also arranged his flight to Zurich via Doha. He left the premises shortly after 4 p.m., and at 4:03, 2 more surveillance team members came to the Al-Bustan, dressed in red and blue t-shirts and baseball caps, and most likely carrying equipment. Kevin left at 4:14 p.m. and headed to the scene, followed by Gale and the other suspects 2 minutes later. While outside, a complete assassin group was preparing to eliminate him. The Hamas arms dealer took a shower and changed clothes in his room. A bit later, at 4:23, he left the hotel and went to an unknown location. A parking lot security camera captured the person in red following him in order to send information about his car to the others. Soon after, he made his way back to the hotel lobby. Police Chief Tamim later claimed the Hamas CLO had not met anyone in the city and that Al-Mabhouh had only gone shopping. However, according to intelligence sources, he met a banker and an Iranian man in the same mall where the secret agents had previously gathered. They most likely had dinner together, given the hotel had no record of Al-Mabhouh eating or drinking in any of its restaurants. The banker was a man who had previously assisted him with numerous international weapons transactions, and the contact from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards flew in to coordinate the delivery of 2 large shipments of weapons to Hamas the next month. Kevin arrived at the scene of the showdown, the Al-Bustan Rotana Hotel, at 4:25, followed by Peter Elvinger 3 minutes later, who sat down and placed a suitcase next to him. At 4:33 p.m., Elvinger checked into room 237 and received the electronic key. The man then returned to Kevin, handed it over to him, left his suitcase, and departed at 4:40. Peter Elvinger then went straight to the airport and left the country on a 7:30 flight. From then on, Kevin and Gale were in command. Kevin went up to room 237 at 4:44 p.m., followed by Gale at 5:06, and 30 minutes later a man who appeared to be wearing a wig joined them. At 6:21, the woman exited the hotel with several bags in her hands and headed to the parking lot to hand them over to other operatives. She then returned to room 237. The first two members of the actual four-man kill team entered the hotel at 6:32. One was wearing a white cap and a dark green t-shirt, the other a blue shirt. They went up to the second floor via elevator, and two more men followed them 2 minutes later at 6:34. One of them was wearing a dark baseball cap and a gray shirt, while the other a red cap and a dark blue sweatshirt. They were carrying a black backpack and a black and white bag. By then, inside room 237 were Kevin and Gail, the four executioners, as well as one other suspect. At 6:41, a middle-aged man and a woman entered the hotel to replace the lookouts monitoring the lobby. They likely heavily masked their faces and wore large hats, and they were also caught on camera talking to someone on the phone. The red and the blue lookouts left the Rotana at 6:42, while their white and blue counterparts, who followed Al-Mabhouh to his room, withdrew at 6:43. Things were already in motion. Kevin and Gail were constantly monitoring the second floor, and CCTV captured the man making a phone call. They had been waiting until 8 p.m. when the four-man execution squad attempted to enter the target's room. However, a hotel guest exiting the elevator nearly caught them, but Kevin quickly intervened, holding up the man as the group either retreated or entered. The Rotana's security system even registered an unsuccessful reprogramming attempt on Al-Mabhouh's door exactly at 8 p.m. They wanted to use an unregistered electronic key, with particular care not to disable the Palestinian man's key in the process. The Fox returned to his room at 8:24 p.m. and even saw Gail walking in the opposite direction along the corridor, smiling as she phoned next to the elevator. The exact way in which the four assassins entered the room remains unclear. One possibility is that they hacked the door lock, as the security system recorded an attempt. Alternatively, investigators suggested that Kevin and Gail may have posed as hotel staff and simply knocked on the door. We don't know for sure because there was no camera aimed directly at the entrance. There were no signs of forced entry. However, due to the professional manner in which they left the scene, it is 99% certain that the first option occurred. Additionally, the VIN card locklink lock in question can be accessed and reprogrammed directly at the hotel room door. Hamas also said later that the assassins were waiting for him inside the room. This means that the hit squad, not knowing in advance which hotel Al-Mabhouh would be staying at, required their lockpicker to practice disabling every type of lock used in all the major hotels in Dubai. The question may arise, if they were already in the opposite room by 5:45 p.m., why did they wait for hours to enter Al-Mabhouh's? The answer is simple. They wanted to minimize the number of human contacts, such as accidentally bumping into a hotel maid. They calculated right because the door's security system registered that the laundry was picked up shortly after 7 p.m. Furthermore, since they had been tracking the arms smuggler all along, they knew exactly when to enter. At 8:24, Mahmoud Al-Mabhouh returned to the Al Bustan Rotana Hotel and went straight to the second floor, passing Kevin at the elevator and Gail in the corridor. He has no reason to be suspicious. His key works properly, and the door shows no signs of forced entry. No one knows for sure what happened once he and the executioners were in. But while the murder was carried out in the room, Kevin and Gail were continuously patrolling the place and watching passers-by. At 8:46, the assassins began to leave the hotel, indicating their mission was complete. Again, they didn't move together. The first two were carrying the large black and white bag suspected of containing murder tools, and one of them even left a rubber glove on. The four men took the elevator together, but they exited the building separately. At 8:47 p.m., Gail and one of her accomplices, who was on the phone with someone, departed. Kevin followed them at 8:51, while the man and female lookouts in the lobby exited at 8:52. The team left Al Bustan in pairs and took taxis to the airport. The hotel staff and local police were completely unaware that one of the most notorious espionage operations of the 21st century had just taken place right in front of their eyes. His wife called Al-Mabhouh shortly before 9 p.m., but the call remained unanswered. The Hamas chief logistics officer, who had orchestrated murders, abductions, suicide attacks, and major international arms smugglings for decades and was Israel's most wanted, was lying lifeless in his hotel room. Within the next 12 hours, the hit team flew to various countries. At 10:30, the airport's CCTV captured Kevin and Gail. However, they again seemed to look somewhat different here. They used Irish passports with the names Kevin Daverin and Gail Folliard, and they both traveled to Paris. 4 hours after the execution, the person named Evan Dennings left for Zurich. Michael Lawrence flew to Frankfurt 10 hours later using British papers, as did James Leonard 12 hours after the action. Certain Melvin Adam Mildiner and Stephen Daniel Hodes, both holding British passports, took off after 10 p.m. to South Africa. One Michael Bodenheimer had German documents and escaped to Hong Kong after 11 p.m., as did Jonathan Lewis Graham and Paul John Keeley, who both carried British papers. And these were the only people the police had initially identified as participants. A hotel maid discovered Al-Mabhouh's body around 1:30 p.m. on January 20th, approximately 17 hours after he was killed because he failed to check out as scheduled. The entire assassination was staged to look like a natural death. Even the door was locked and chained from the inside, although the police had absolutely no idea how they did it. His body was discovered on the bed, and a bottle of medicine was placed on the nightstand, pushing the investigation towards an overdose case. Only subsequent examinations revealed what they had done to him, because the authorities initially thought an extreme increase in blood pressure could have affected his brain. The autopsy was partly performed by Dr. Fawzi Benomran, and after 10 days, investigators concluded it was an assassination. It was meant to look like death from natural causes during sleep, the coroner said. Al-Mabhouh was first immobilized with a fast-acting muscle relaxant called succinylethonium chloride. It was injected into his right hip, which, in addition to its anesthetic effect, can cause short-term paralysis within a minute. Regarding this substance, it is important that while people are unable to use their muscles, they do not lose consciousness, so they are fully aware of their surroundings. However, larger doses can cause respiratory muscles to shut down, which ultimately leads to death. The remains of the muscle relaxant can be detected in the body long after death, and the executioners must have been aware of this. The hit team surely expected the results, and the disguises were just meant to buy time. The attackers used a stun gun at one point. Sources say they wanted to induce a heart attack because burn marks were discovered on his chest, behind his ear, and on his inner thigh. In the end, the job was probably finished with a pillow because the Hamas commander's blood was found on one of them, and it was revealed that the Palestinian man had been bleeding from his nose before his death. The few broken slats of the bed frame under the mattress, as well as the damaged headboard, suggested a struggle. Dr. Saeed Hamiri of the Dubai Forensic Lab said they found mild bruises on his nose, neck, and head. According to the death certificate, the exact cause of death was a brain hemorrhage, caused by electrocution, most likely by a massive electric shock to the head. The entire showdown, including the execution, removal of the traces, rearrangement of the room, and careful departure, was completed in just 20 minutes. The Dubai police initially had no idea who the victim was, and they didn't really dive into the case as there were no clear signs of homicide. This contradicted Hamas's claim that Al-Mabhouh had used his real identity. Hamas spokesman Talal Nasser said, "He had 5 passports, one with his real name and the rest with different names, but this time he traveled under his real identity. He had traveled to Dubai many times in the past in the same way without any problems. But if he indeed used his true identity, authorities would have been aware of his presence, and after his death, officials would have been alerted that a top Hamas commander, one of the key figures in anti-Israel activities, was found dead in the Emirates. Nevertheless, when Al-Mabhouh did not report back to the Damascus headquarters, Hamas grew suspicious and sent one of his men to the Dubai morgue to look for, and if necessary, identify him. A whole week passed before the Hamas leadership revealed the real name of the deceased to Dubai Police Chief Tamim, who was furious because of them bringing their conflict to the Emirates. "Take yourselves and your bank accounts, and your weapons and your forged passports, and get out of my country," he shouted, according to some reports. His sixth-floor office was only a few minutes from the Al-Bustan, so everything essentially happened right in front of him. He was also outraged because Hamas didn't notify him in advance that one of their most targeted men was about to enter the City of Gold. After examining hundreds of hours of CCTV footage, the police determined that at least 11 people were involved in the operation at the scene. But with helpers from other locations in Dubai and from abroad, there might have been at least 27 conspirators. Narrowing down the list of suspects was relatively simple because detectives managed to trace back who called the Austrian numbers that day, and the agents used rare debit cards, but I'll go into more detail soon. Turned out the commando members flew in from Rome, Paris, Zurich, and Frankfurt. The first ones had landed at Dubai International Airport a day earlier on January 18, 2010, at 6:45 a.m., and then scattered throughout the city waiting for further instructions. According to French intelligence sources, the group rented a room in the Bercy neighborhood of Paris, in a hotel near the Ministry of Finance building, where they set up a makeshift command center with computers and secure phones, and all kinds of other high-tech equipment. This is interesting because for a long time, based on the phone calls, the command center was thought to be in Austria, but this appears to have been a diversion. In 2018, a French intelligence official told Le Monde that France's hands are tied since it depends on Israel in many sensitive issues. The city is the Mossad's playground. The Chinese and the Russians may be our enemies, but let us not forget the Israelis and the Americans are also conducting themselves with great aggression. Our ability to respond to their actions is limited because they rush to use the diplomatic card and complain to the French Prime Minister and President's offices. The reason Mossad and many other foreign intelligence agencies, including the CIA, have chosen Paris as their center of operations is because of the frequent visits of African leaders and that it hosts many international conferences. The French capital is also home to many foreigners, and France dedicates most of its espionage activities to the fight against terrorism. Therefore, it doesn't have enough manpower for counter-espionage, the intelligence source said. The hit squad was communicating through encrypted channels all along, and officials were unable to detect anything other than the calls to Austria. Probably only a call distributor was there, so the participants wouldn't call each other directly. Instead, the call first went to a dedicated private switchboard in Austria, and from there, it was forwarded to their fellow operatives. Once it became clear that the murder was deliberate and premeditated, suspicion quickly shifted to Israel and the Mossad, although no undeniable evidence has been presented and no one has been convicted in the case so far. Nevertheless, on February 18, 2010, Police Chief Dahi Khalfan Tamim stated that they were 99%, if not 100% sure that the Israeli agency was behind the operation. He even demanded the arrest of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Mossad boss Meir Dagan. According to press reports, the assassination was carried out by the elite team of Mossad, the Caesarea. The unit was named after the ancient city where Jewish leaders were martyred against the Romans. Red Page is Mossad's codename for a killing order, and according to Spiegel, each of these orders is jointly authorized by the Israeli Prime Minister and Defense Minister. However, these red pages are not immediate orders. In fact, they have no expiration date and remain in effect until explicitly cancelled. Mahmoud Al-Mabhouh received his red page in 1989 after killing the two soldiers. Caesarea consists of the best-trained agents of the espionage organization and is responsible for the most dangerous and critical missions, including assassinations, sabotage, and penetration of high-security installations. The unit reportedly recruits the military special forces soldiers, and its members work in such isolation from other Mossad operatives that they rarely interact with agents from other branches and avoid the Mossad headquarters in North Tel Aviv. They are trained in top-secret facilities where no one else has access. Except for their spouses, no one can know their real names, and they are not allowed to use them in any circumstances, not even in private conversations. Al-Mabhouh's poisoning 2 months earlier was also linked to them, and even though he recovered, he didn't suspect that his 36-hour unconsciousness was the result of an attempted murder. On the second try, however, nothing was left to chance, and intelligence sources claimed they were only allowed to leave the room once they determined and confirmed with their own eyes that the man was 100% dead. Informants shared that Caesarea fighters, as they call themselves, visited Dubai 5 times in the 9 months preceding the action, in February, March, and June, each time to make sure that the target was indeed the fox. The unquestionable identification was crucial because their predecessors accidentally killed Ahmed Bouchiki, a Moroccan waiter and musician, in Norway in 1973. They mistook him for Ali Hassan Salameh, the chief of operations for Black September, another Palestinian armed group responsible for the 1972 Munich Olympic Games massacre and the assassination of Jordanian Prime Minister Wasfi Tal. After Bouchiki's death, the Mossad agents were apprehended and imprisoned, and Israel had to pay substantial reparations to the victim's family. It was a huge embarrassment for the Jewish state. The presumed personal details of the 11 suspects were made public, but the investigation concluded that at least 18 people entered the United Arab Emirates using meticulously forged or fraudulently obtained passports with stolen identities. However, the police could not determine whether they were 100% fake because, for example, airport staff is specially trained to recognize them, but they didn't detect anything during the check-in procedures. We can say the papers were fake to varying degrees, and only one of them was actually genuine, the German passport issued to a certain Michael Bodenheimer, who landed among the first operatives. It was later revealed that the passport had been issued on June 18, 2009, in Cologne, and the man claimed German citizenship through his claimed father, Hans Bodenheimer, who was born in Germany and was a Holocaust survivor. The German investigation concluded, however, that a real Holocaust survivor named Hans Bodenheimer did in fact exist, but he was not the man's father who applied for German citizenship. Furthermore, the real Michael Bodenheimer, who lived in Israel and held dual American and Israeli citizenship, said he doesn't know how his identity was stolen. He emigrated to Israel from the US decades before the Dubai events. His wife, Mina Bodenheimer, told Net News, "We've lived in Bnei Brak for 30 years, and we've never been in Germany. We don't know anything apart from what was reported in the press. We have not been approached by any Israeli or European body, including Interpol." Worth highlighting that the passport scandal only affected countries from which visas were not required to enter the UAE. And in May 2010, it was discovered that a member of the group had used his British passport with the identity of an Israeli soldier killed in the 1973 Yom Kippur War. The team had also used 3 Irish passports, but Ireland's Department of Foreign Affairs stated that no travel documents were ever issued in any of those names. It is also interesting that while the photos and the signatures were fake, the identification numbers were real. The original owners told authorities they never went to Dubai and their documents were not stolen. One of them said he had no idea how this happened, or who chose his name and why. The French found 4 passports, including one with the name Peter Elvinger, the suspected field commander. On June 4, 2010, Polish authorities arrested a man in transit at Warsaw Airport, carrying a forged passport bearing the name Yuri Brodsky, who was wanted by German authorities. The man was on his way from Tel Aviv to Vilnius. He was also known to police as Alexander Varin and was accused of being involved in illegally obtaining a German passport for the imposter Michael Bodenheimer. In July, Following alleged diplomatic pressure from Israel, the Polish court approved his extradition to Germany, but only on the condition that Varin wouldn't face espionage charges, only for falsely obtaining documents. He was subsequently transferred to the Western neighbor on August 12th. However, the Israeli embassy hired two of Germany's best attorneys, who paid the 100,000 euros bail the next day, and on August 14th, the man returned to Israel. At the end of 2010, Germany suspended the case of the documents in return for a 60,000 euros fine, but the arrest warrant on the espionage charges remains in effect. The case involved two other notable arrests, both involving Palestinian men. One of them was a certain Ahmad Hasnin, or Hassanin, an intelligence operative of the Palestinian Authority. The PA is the de facto governing body of West Bank Palestinians and only de jure of the Gaza Strip, because it's been controlled by Hamas since June 2007, when they took over the region from the rival party Fatah. The other suspect was one Anwar Shekhaibar, or Shebar, a Palestinian Authority employee in Ramallah. Both were former members of Fatah's security service. They were apprehended in Jordan at the request of Police Chief Tamim, and then transferred to Dubai, as suspected accomplices to the assassination, and suspected of giving logistical assistance to the agents, such as providing car rentals and hotel bookings. The two men's arrest sparked a severe conflict between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, because the former claimed the incident was evidence linking the Palestinian Authority to the assassination, while the Palestinian Authority retorted by accusing the arrested Palestinians of belonging to Hamas. A Palestinian court even sentenced Ahmad Hasnin to death after he was reportedly recruited by Mossad while he was imprisoned in Israel in 2007. Dubai police said one of them met an Israeli suspect before the operation in a suspicious place and manner. Both individuals were taken to the Emirates and detained to prevent anyone from executing them. 6 British passports and the German used data from people who were dual citizens and resided in Israel. Regarding this, it is important to note that most countries' intelligence services, such as the CIA, can simply provide their agents with passports, allowing them to travel abroad without any obstacles. However, Israel is in a considerably more difficult situation because the primary target countries of operations for the Jewish state spy agency are Middle Eastern states with which they have traditionally poor diplomatic relations. Therefore, they cannot issue Israeli passports, since their agents would be arrested or placed under surveillance as soon as they enter most Muslim countries. Only Kevin and Gail paid in cash at the first hotel after their arrival. 17 of the alleged participants purchased their plane tickets using prepaid MasterCard debit cards branded by MetaBank of Storm Lake, Iowa, but the plastics were issued by Payoneer, an Israeli-based financial startup. Other credit cards showed ties to Britain's Nationwide Building Society, IDT Finance of Gibraltar, and Germany's DZ Bank AG. The American connection is particularly intriguing because Dubai authorities had repeatedly asked the United States for assistance in the case, but they were rejected every single time. As strange as it sounds, it isn't entirely surprising, given that the US is one of the base countries for Israeli intelligence. It means it is a country where they can operate relatively easily, and besides embassies, they have access to multiple getaway routes in case of emergency. Yossi Melman and Dan Raviv explained in The Atlantic that beyond being close allies, the CIA has adopted Israel's attitude in weighing extrajudicial killings. This means that intelligence chiefs pause to measure morality. They contend that ending the life of one enemy activist with little or no collateral damage is far better than waiting to encounter him on a battlefield. And if the target has been a talented planner of terror strikes, ending his activities has to be the right thing to do. It's worth noting that Payoneer CEO Yuval Tal had previously served in the Israeli Defense Forces as a special operations commander who also dealt with intelligence. Moreover, of the 3 venture capitalists behind the company, Greylock had ties to Israeli intelligence through its founder, Moshe Moore, a former military intelligence captain in the Israeli army. But all 3 companies, Greylock, Crossbar Capital, and Carmel Ventures, are of Israeli origin. However, only the suspicious transactions linked Yuval Tal to the case, and he denied any involvement. Nonetheless, everything points to a Mossad operation, Israel, of course, denied, or at least did not admit its involvement. Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman commented the press may have watched too many Bond movies. I would also like to emphasize that without clear evidence, we can only speculate about the involvement of Israeli citizens, as the true identities of the assassination group remain unknown. Sources claimed that Mahmoud Al-Mabhouh's computer and email communication had been monitored for a long time with a Trojan horse. The authorities suspected that a Hamas member who betrayed Al-Mabhouh installed the malware rather than someone hacking into his PC. The scandal had some mild diplomatic repercussions. For instance, the United Arab Emirates and Israel didn't communicate for over a year. Only the USA's brokering eased the situation. A noteworthy measure was that following Operation Plasma Screen, Abu Dhabi, the capital of the UAE, signed a $9 million contract with American ICX Technologies to expand its surveillance camera network and liken it to Dubai's. The British issued an expulsion order against a senior Israeli diplomat, believed to be a local Mossad coordinator. There were reactions and condemnations from around the world, but it was clear to anyone familiar with this world that these were only serious steps for the public. Sending embassy officials home serves as a symbolic message, indicating that certain practices are unacceptable. The higher the rank, the more serious the message. The absence of political answers stemmed from inconclusive evidence, and that the deceased was a leader of an organization labeled as terrorist. Furthermore, Israel plays an important role as a trading and innovation partner, arms supplier, and financial investor for many countries. Its international diplomatic power and its perks are vital to everyone. Politically, the British and the French protested the most over the use of EU passports, which they saw as a provocation. The British and the Israelis already had a past with passport scandals. In 1986, an Israeli intelligence officer accidentally left a bag full of British passports in a phone booth in West Germany. The incident infuriated the UK so much that they cut all contact with Mossad until the mid-1990s. Paris was particularly concerned that the French passports would lead Hamas to believe that they were involved in the execution, which could have caused serious problems within France's large Muslim population. The greatest damage was done to Mossad's relations with Western intelligence services because they felt that Israel did not respect even its allies. The scandal escalated to the point that the head of the Caesarea unit, who was seen as a potential successor to Mayor Dagan, offered his resignation in June 2010. However, it was not accepted, meaning his superior took full responsibility for the situation. France reportedly sent 2 agents to meet with the Mossad chief to express their disappointment. It was a way to send a message that this was an intolerable line crossing, the head of the French police's investigations department said. Although Israel neither confirmed nor denied its involvement in the case, several years later, senior French intelligence officials stated that Mossad had to pay the price by disclosing sensitive information. We will never know if anything came of it, but the alliance was restored with time. One might wonder what occurs to those involved in such an operation afterwards. If they indeed worked for an intelligence agency, there is a good chance they had returned to their country of origin as soon as possible, where they were held on desk jobs for a while. Since the police determined that the Hamas commander's death was a premeditated murder only after 10 days, the hit team members were able to travel home with ease. In the meantime, they have probably changed their appearance and built up a credible cover story. And since we are talking about the most trained professionals, some of them might have been sent back to the field, and they are most likely operating somewhere in the world now. However, Interpol added the photos of 11 suspects to its most wanted list, and Dubai police disclosed that airport staff performed retinal scans on 11 of the suspects upon their entry into the Emirates. In addition, investigators found the DNA of 4 people and fingerprints of several members. A mysterious development occurred in December 2010 when an Australian-Israeli dual citizen and alleged Mossad agent named Ben Zigir was found dead in his cell in Israel's most heavily guarded prison, the Ayalon facility. He was such a big deal inside that his wardens only knew him as Prisoner X because even they were unaware of his true identity. The man was discovered in his supposedly suicide-proof cell 2 days after speaking to top Israeli defense attorney Avigdor Feldman. He told him about the serious charges he faced, the quite likely possibility of a very lengthy imprisonment, and that he would be ostracized by his family. The lawyer later stated that the man appeared rational and focused during their talk, but Ziguier had an emotional conversation with his wife prior to their meeting. However, Prisoner X was not on suicide watch, meaning he was not checked every few minutes, only every 20 minutes. Unconfirmed reports claimed that he was involved in the operation against Mahmoud Al-Mabhouh, but shortly after, Ziguier betrayed Mossad and provided information to Dubai police. The agent may have succeeded to some extent, as it was reportedly he who revealed the names of the hit team in exchange for protection. Following this, the authorities took him to a protected building, but Mossad was somehow able to kidnap him, transfer him back home, and place him in solitary confinement in a separate wing inside one of Israel's toughest prisons, the feared Unit 15 of Ayalon. The man was reportedly involved in numerous covert operations, with the Al-Mabhouh assassination being the last. After the Dubai mission, he wanted to switch sides. However, Mossad intervened to ensure he wouldn't cause too much damage. So these were the events leading up to his demise, but it is important to note that this story wasn't confirmed by independent sources. Back to our main topic, this is what an almost flawlessly executed political assassination looks like in the 21st century. I say almost, because the cover-up was just partially successful, probably due to the hasty nature of the operation. The police chief even ridiculed the two lookouts who had been walking around the hotel lobby since 2:12 p.m., carrying tennis rackets and with towels thrown over their shoulders. Tamim said it was the team's most glaring mistake, and that no real tennis player walks around with his tennis racket out of its case. Nonetheless, this operation demonstrates that the world's most skilled secret services can hunt down anyone if they choose to, except for a select group of heavily protected individuals. Of course, such an order demands serious reasoning, and to be frank, Israel is not the only guilty party. Similar missions have also been conducted by American and European organizations, as well as the Soviets and later the Russians, along with Muslim and East Asian countries. It has been speculated that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may have issued the order after meeting with the dreaded Mossad chief, Meir Dagan, in early January 2010, a few days before the assassination. Whatever the truth is, there is no doubt that there are organizations, units, and individuals on this planet who can kill with permission from their home country and who would face consequences only if they are caught abroad. Meir Dagan was born as Mir Huberman in 1945 in Kherson, USSR. He was conscripted into the military in 1963 and later fought in the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, and the 1982 Lebanon War. He rose to Major General in the IDF and served as the National Security Advisor to Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, who eventually appointed him Director General of the Mossad in 2002. Before his arrival, it was a fading and tired organization where work atmosphere and morale plummeted, especially after the historic humiliation of 1997. That year, the Israeli espionage agency wanted to assassinate Hamas's political head, Khaled Mashal, by spraying a chemical agent on his ear as he walked down a street in Amman, Jordan. The mission failed, and two of their operatives were even captured. They were released only in exchange for the antidote and the release of Hamas's spiritual leader and founder, Sheikh Yassin. It was Dagan who managed to restore the organization to its former prestige. His primary targets became the Iranian nuclear program and the Iranian-backed groups, such as Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. With his arrival, the number and frequency of covert operations increased dramatically. His nickname was King of Shadows, and there are many stories about his personality, with most of them portraying him negatively. He was described as a rigid, ruthless man with brutal efficiency. Dagan did not tolerate dissent and was notorious for his aggressive, verbally abusive leadership style. He reportedly had a ritual before every dangerous operation. When preparing operatives for a mission, he would summon them to his office, where hung a photograph of a bearded Jewish man wearing a prayer shawl, kneeling on the ground with his hands raised to the sky. Next to him stood the menacing members of the Ordnungspolizei, the uniformed police force in Nazi Germany that belonged under the SS, with one of them holding a gunsling and the other a club. During these briefings, Dagen pointed to the picture and said it was taken on October 5, 1942, and the kneeling man was his grandfather, Dov Ehrlich, who was killed along with his family in Lukov, Poland shortly after. He instructed the agents to look at the picture, because that must guide them to act on behalf of the State of Israel to ensure that such a tragic incident would never happen again. Before the Dubai job, Mayor Dagen had hoped for an extension of his term as head of the Mossad, and a successful delivery would have sealed the deal for him. However, while Mahmoud Al-Mabhouh's assassination was a success for them, the execution was far too noisy, and Israel had to cope with the political and intelligence embarrassment. Ultimately, the King of Shadows didn't continue as director of the Mossad and was succeeded by Tamir Pardo in January 2011. In 2012, the infamous Spymaster of the Middle East was diagnosed with liver cancer and died on March 17, 2016, at the age of 71. His only public comment regarding the Dubai job came during a 2012 interview with CBS, where he said, "I've never heard that any Israeli was arrested." He also remarked that he could not take Police Chief Tamim's demand for his arrest seriously. Mahmoud Al-Mabhouh's body was taken back to Syria and buried in Yarmouk, a Palestinian neighborhood in Damascus, and he is still highly respected among many Palestinians. The Hamas was weakened for a while because a large void had to be filled. The Fox was eventually succeeded by Abdelaziz al-Khalidi, who became responsible for laundering money transferred to Hamas from international Islamic movements, Iran, and the Islamist group's political bureau in Damascus. He was eventually arrested in the Emirates in January 2011 on suspicion of laundering money associated with Hamas and investing illegal funds in UAE territory. Apart from the passport scandal and a few issued expulsion orders, Mahmoud Al-Mabhouh's death didn't have any permanent consequences regarding interstate relations. A good indication of this was the 2020 Abraham Accords, a series of bilateral agreements in which several Muslim countries, including the United Arab Emirates, have committed to normalizing relations with Israel.